Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Book Nook. My name is Jordan H. Bartlett, author of the Freyne Chronicles, Contest of Queens being the first one. And I am joined today by the wonderful Madison Lawson. Madison, thank you so much for coming to me across the globe, because I think I'm in England right now and you're in the States. Welcome.
Yeah. Hi, thank you for having me.
So today we're going to talk about how to dystopiate your future because your new novel, The Registration, comes out September 27th. So that's very soon. And it's all about a kind of not so distant dystopian future.
Yep, it is. Pretty, I feel like it's something that could definitely happen in this world. So,
Oh, I definitely got goosebumps because some of the things that you would describe, I'm like, oh, we're not really that far off.
I think we're living in a dystopian society right now, but it is what it is.
That's for another conversation. So first, we'll start with tell us about yourself.
All
Something
right.
easy.
So my name is Madison, and I'm from Texas, but I'm currently living in North Carolina, getting my master's degree in English. I wonder all the time why I'm doing that, but I am. Uh, I have a dog who's the most perfect boy in the world, and let's see what else. I graduated from A&M, and I like to write and read a lot, of course. I think, yeah, those are the most interesting things about me.
And you're currently surviving our dystopian world.
I am, yes, I'm trying to.
And tell us a little bit about your book, The Registration.
So the registration is set in what feels like our world, but a little dystopian, and it's about this woman, Linnell Mize, who is in line to complete a registration, which is the right for most citizens to legally kill one person in their life. So they just have to register who they want to kill, and then they have 14 days to complete it. And if they do it without the 14 or outside of the 14 days, or if they don't register or something like that, then it's murder and you're tried for murder. But she's in line to register her stepfather when she hears somebody naming her, and she doesn't know this person, so it's a complete stranger. And it's told over 14 days as she tries to survive this registration, and she learns all this stuff that she didn't know about herself and the world. And she also reunites with her estranged husband. And there's some secrets there between them that gets brought up over the 14 days.
And I loved Danny. Um, so with her registering, it's such an interesting concept because we have this idea of if it's outside of the registration, it's murder. If it's within the registration, it's justice being served. So it's this constant, like, I don't know, it's almost like double think.
Yeah.
Where did you get your inspiration for this concept and for this novel?
So I tend to always write out of some sort of anger or confusion. So if there's something that pisses me off or that I don't understand, I tend to start writing to work my way through it. And a few years ago, different political events kept popping up in my life, and they would cause friction in my relationships. Specifically, anytime the topic of abortion or the death penalty got brought up, it was like whoever I was with, the conversation, if we didn't agree, it would like kind of explode, and I would get angry, and they would get angry, and I tend to have really strong opinions about things, and so I've worked on not, you know, blowing up at people with my opinions, but it's like I've learned that lots of different political conversations, such as those two things, almost always get a huge rise out of people, whether they're super opinionated or not. And I started noticing how other people's opinions on these things greatly impacted the way that I saw them or thought about them or like interacted with them. And it made me wonder like what it would look like if anything that anybody considers is murder. So some people think abortion is murder. So if like that or cold blooded killing somebody or assisted suicide, like any or the death penalty, like anything that anybody is like that's murder, if those were legal in some like form under no circumstance, what would that look like and how would that like affect relationships? And so I started writing the registration, and I didn't want to focus on like teen girl saves dystopian world, even though I love those books. I really just wanted to focus on the impact of something like this on families and relationships and stuff like that. So
Oh, I love that. And it's so true because it has the ability to completely change your opinion of someone who you've known for years. It has the ability to, like you say, there's always so much anger that it explodes from these topics. And I really love that in this book, you took the time to kind of give those different instances space to breathe. Like the book itself is quite fast paced. We're following Linnell and she is running for her life for most of it, but we have these really beautiful moments where there is, I think there was a family in line at the registration, or they're basically wanting to bring about their very ill mother's death because life is too hard for her. And you're kind of like, yeah, well, that's actually a gift that their child is giving their registration to their loved one, which you wouldn't even think that could be how you would feel about such a law, but it was.
yeah, I like as I was writing, I realized, or at least I in my head thought that most people would use their registration for something that a lot of people don't see as like cold-blooded murder, like assisted suicide or abortions or different things like that. I was like, this, like, we have all kinds of killing happening in our life all the time in our world, and I didn't want it to be like every other day, some like somebody is shooting somebody on the street because they want their money or a job promotion or something like that. You know, even though
Yeah.
it doesn't probably happen, but yeah, that's not like one to. It just looked more to me like if this was a normal thing that people saw as a gift, they would use it as a gift.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was so clever having everyone just gets one. And it was so clever normalizing it as quickly as you did because you really get into the mindset of, I mean, everyone walking around today technically has the ability to kill people, but we don't because we're all good people. So I like that it wasn't just full on purge where everyone turns into a psychomaniac who wants to get their vengeance. It's like, no, this is an option and it is a more brutal world we live in, but some of it makes sense. Like some of it, yeah, a lot of it made sense. What were some other considerations when you were creating this world, like different rules or laws or kind of fine print that you had to make sure was in the world so that it made sense?
Well, I mean, one of the main things was obviously I needed to figure out everything that would be considered a registration. So I spent a lot of time like imagining all the different instances that somebody might use theirs, and a lot of it like never showed up in this book. Might show up in a possible sequel, but like um, even stuff as horrible as like hate crimes. Would somebody use their registration to legally commit a hate crime? Or like weird, creepy religious sacrifices. Like there's just I had to think of all a bunch of different instances that might happen, and then how people would react and how that would um, affect daily life. And I also like I think with any dystopian world or like government controlling a system or anything like that, there are going to be people against it. So I also needed to look at how that would look in this world. Like how were people rebelling against the registration? Um, how did they fight it? How did they spread their message that this isn't humane and this shouldn't be how our world works? Because it's not always storming the Capitol. Sometimes it's writing pamphlets or posting on social media, different things like that to get other people on their side of not liking the registration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and I love that idea. I just jumping back to something you said earlier, I really liked all of the little details that you had to put in of what it would look like on day-to-day life, especially the airplane. I liked that in the, this is your captain speaking, little speech. It was like, if you are completing a registration for everyone's health and safety, please wait till the plane lands. Like, I just, like, please don't kill on this aircraft because then we have to deal with the body for 26 hours or however, 26 hours. Oh my gosh, where are you flying? 6 hours.
The plane can stay up for that long without getting gas.
You're just going around the world twice. But it was just this really nice little touch where it's like, yeah, I guess, I mean, it is the law that they are allowed to kill, but in the reality of a plane setting, maybe don't fire a firearm.
Yeah, like there are still little laws about the registration, even though it's legal. It's like, and that was another thing that I had to think about was a lot of it wasn't in this book because there just wasn't space, but small laws that have to be in place to keep this bigger law working. So, can you take weapons onto aircrafts or things like that? What is the selling of weapons look like? What is it like? Are there places you're not allowed to complete a registration? Can churches take like invoke some sort of religious belief and be like, we don't believe this, so then no registrations can happen on our property? Like different stuff like that that I didn't know how the government or like the laws what they would look like to keep order even amidst the 2 weeks where people are killing other people.
Yeah, I guess because it's a whole society then that you have to build around this idea. And were there any unexpected ripple effects or kind of workarounds or snags that you caught when you were creating the registration?
I think one was foreign relations. The first few, like my early drafts, didn't mention other places in the world at all. And then my editor like brought it up. She was like, how is the rest of the world seeing America right now?" And so that was ripple effect was how this affects the countries for like relationships with other countries. Are people still immigrating here? Do people try and leave here all the time? If somebody gets like this actually is briefly in the novel, if somebody does move to America and get citizenship, what is the law about the registration for them? Like they don't get their own, but they could now legally be registered. So who's going to want to move to a country where they could possibly be legally murdered, but never get one of their own? And then another one that I thought of that actually was like small and kind of boring, but also kind of fun to think about was insurance companies. Like, what did insurance look like in this world? If you register someone, or if like you register yourself, does that mean that your family gets your life insurance policy? Or if like something happens to your car or your house because of a registration, how does insurance cover that? Like different stuff like that. That was weirdly fun to think about, even though I feel like it'd be more boring to read about.
But it's all those little details that make and flesh out your world so that when you're reading it, you think, oh my gosh, I'm here right now.
Yeah. Or like things like you're going to need other people's help sometimes to complete your registration. And are they allowed to do that? Or are they going to want to? Like if you register somebody in prison because you want to complete your own death penalty, you now need the help of the prison guards to get to this person and complete your registration. Like, do the guards legally have to help you, or is it kind of up to their morals? And where do you complete it? Do you have to go to their cell, or do you meet them in like those meeting spaces where like prisoners go to see their families or whatever, like stuff like that.
And then, yeah, if you're on the outside and someone and going to help someone fulfill their registration, you are then what, bringing a gun into a prison, which is not really a good thing. So that, yeah, there's so many little things. Is there any advice you would give to aspiring authors who want to write kind of this Black Mirror-esque, not so distant dystopian novel?
I think the biggest thing is just don't forget about the details. I forgot about some of the like the foreign relations or stuff like that. And even if it seems boring, the details are what make the world uh, more easily accessible, or like somewhere that you would want to live in during the like version of or time of reading this book. Those details are what help it become more believable that the characters in the novel are accepting this. And I think it's just figuring out how to consider stuff that would never really affect you. Like if you're not a religious person, you still need to think about how this affects religion in the world. Like how are the churches responding to this? Are there new religions popping up? Are some of them shutting down because of it? Like it's stuff that you might not like personally interact with on a daily basis, but other people do, and so it would have affected that in their life. And so the details of how that now works in a world with a that works differently than what we know is important.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Yeah, and you could get down a huge rabbit hole, but as long as you've thought about it and you know the answer, it doesn't have to show up in that world. But because you as the author know it, you're going to be able to either speak to it or have it flavor how you talk about things. Like even like you mentioned with religion, I mean, 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill. However, in our world, we have the 10 commandments and we still have many Christian soldiers who go out and kill for their country. So there are different ways that all of that set in stone truth could be twisted and fit then something like the registration.
I mean, religion in particular is an interesting one because, like, if you've read The Handmaid's Tale,
Love The Handmaid's Tale.
To, justify their world, and obvious, like in the registration, religion is not used to justify it, but there would still be impacts on churches and stuff. Like there's a brief like meeting with a religious person in the registration, and she dislikes like the Elysion family, the people who brought the registration to the world, because she says, I can't remember the actual quote, but she says something like, if anyone who considers himself God will think heaven, or will create their own hell, and anyone who follows them will think heaven is in a cell.
Oh yes, I love that quote.
Things that I wrote.
Yeah.
In the book. So she's like, how is this a woman? What does she think about this? And with her beliefs and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. No, and that was so beautifully written. Gorgeous, gorgeous quote. Is there any one aspect that you're really proud of? It doesn't have to be specifically about the registration, but maybe one of the characters, any aspect in your novel?
I think I'm pretty proud of individual reactions to the world. Specifically, my three main characters, they all kind of have a different opinion of the registration, and all of those opinions kind of either a lot or a little morph throughout the book, and it's just none of it is super simple. Everything is really complicated, and I'm kind of proud of how I can't remember my word here. What's the word for when you're explaining something?
Portray or describe?
Yeah, portray is fine. I'm like proud of like how I portrayed that opinions on stuff like this are more complicated than just surface level, and they're usually tied to personal traumas or familial relations or different things like that. And like there are even strangers or like pamphlets, people that you never meet in the novel, who aren't fighting the registration, but they are fighting like abortions being considered registrations, because they're like, yeah, let's keep the registration, but abortion should be its own thing because it's not murder. So why are you only giving women one? Like,
fair, yeah.
I don't know. I liked the like different, complicated, layered reactions that people had, or even there's some people that post during the 2 weeks of the registration, they go around, they find all the most violent completed registrations, and they film them or take photos and then post them on social media to try and spread fear. They're like, see, like this is what this does to our people, when in reality, most of them are not that violent, like it's a suicide. Um, so yeah, I think that's something that I'm pretty proud of.
When you did it so well, I loved because, like you said, with the three main characters, they do have very different backgrounds towards how they feel or why they're feeling how they feel towards the registration. They come from different places and they move to different places. And I just love that you never once tell us exactly how to feel about the registration. You just show these three very different but very likable characters interacting with it differently. And they even um, debate with one another their side. And so it's just this really realistic thing where it is what it is, and how you view it is going to change your opinion of it. And like you mentioned before, if you're someone who doesn't view abortion as murder, then I loved that there was a little bit there where you were saying, oh, but that's just the government's way of taking registrations from women effectively, or you kind of implied that, because then if they have to use it on something that isn't technically murder, then you're stripping that right from there. Like, I just loved all this nuance around this is the cut and dry thing. And then how every single person interprets it changes the nature of it. Yeah. It was very well done. You did a good job. So I also wanted to touch on, before I ask that question, I wanted to ask if there was any major message you hope readers take away from your novel.
I'm always like a little hesitant to answer that, because I want readers to take away what they need to take away from it, and so I don't want my answer to influence what people are looking for when they're reading. I think that if you go to a book with certain like expectations or influences or whatever, then that's going to change what you find when you're reading it. So some people might need to find one theme or something from the book that somebody else doesn't need to. But if I had to pick, I would want to say, like, I would want people to come away realizing that things are always more complicated than they seem, and that no one should be reduced to one opinion on one thing. Yeah, I still have insanely strong opinions about stuff, and I still think that some political views are just not okay. But I feel like people are too often losing the the nuance to this stuff, and reducing people to whether they're Republican or Democrat. Mm-hmm. And if anything, like, take away that your opinions are always influenced by so many different things. Like, somebody could have the biggest heart ever, but they grew up with certain religious views or opinions being told to them, and that's influencing their current opinion. And like, that doesn't change the fact that they're loving, kind people. It's just they have a different background. And so while you might think their opinion is, some awful thing or directed by some agenda, it might just be the fact that they haven't really ever learned to have a different one, or something like that.
Yeah, and ignorance is brutal, because it then guides actions that you're maybe not even considering. That's so true. And I love that idea that one view or one opinion does not a person make. Like, I liked that in your novel you had these characters with very conflicting views still work together and still find the humanity in one another. Because, yeah, especially in this day and age, we're so quick to just reduce a person to, a tweet that they posted 20 years ago, and then they are forever a bad person, Yeah, I love that. So, but the most exciting thing is that this novel is not only coming out on the 27th, so other people can finally read it, but it's also been picked up for a movie adaptation. And can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Um, so Sydney Sweeney, she's an actor. She's in Euphoria and The White Lotus, and Handmaid's Tale briefly. She has this company called 50/50 Films where they make adaptations out of female authors' debut novels. And she got my manuscript and really liked it and took it to Bradley Fuller, who's a producer. He actually did the Purge movies and A Quiet Place. Um, and he really liked it. So then they came to us, and after a lot of calls, working, emails, whatever, they did get the option to make it into a film at some point. So that's super exciting. And Sydney will be playing Linnell and co-producing it with Bradley Fuller and Sony. Um, and I'm insanely excited. It doesn't feel real. It's a dream come true. And Sydney's amazing. And I think she'll do an incredible job bringing Linnell to life.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yes, I we were talking about this before the interview, but she has the emotional range that she's going to get to the places that Linnell goes, and it's going to be so incredible to watch. That's so exciting. Is there a scene or a character that you're hoping they do well?
I mean, there's a ton, obviously, that I think about, and like there is like Zach in particular. I hope they do well because very um, he's a very complicated character, and I love him. He's my favorite character in the whole book. But I don't want him to be reduced down to like something like bad guy or something like that. So if they do him well, but one big thing is I really, really hope they keep this subplot between Linnell and Daniel, and I can't say out loud what it is because it's a spoiler, but I
Oh,
think they
and it's the
it's a
secret of
pretty
it is beautiful.
yeah, it's a pretty big subplot, and it does impact a lot of their decisions and a lot of the book. So I think they'll keep it in, but I just want them. I hope they do it well and keep like the emotion in it and conversations between Daniel and Linnell as the secret comes out and they learn more things. I think just emotional scenes that have to do with that are like my favorite parts in the book. So I do hope that that's done well.
Yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed for that because I know the revelation. There was a moment where I was like, wait a minute. And then the revelation, it just, oh, it's an arrow to the heart. And then you can't look away. It's just beautiful. So there are some things that we obviously won't talk about because we don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it yet. But are there any aspects of characters that you've written that isn't in the book that maybe won't even make it into a sequel, but that's kind of a fun fact you have about them?
Um, yeah, I almost always know the Enneagram type for my characters. I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram, but it's just another personality type thing. And I almost always so there's I make playlists for my books while I'm writing, and there's this artist called Sleeping at Last, and he has a song for every Enneagram type. So whenever I figure out their Enneagram types, I always put that song on the playlist. Um, but so for Linnell, I think she's an Enneagram 8, which is funny because so am I. Or
Funny that.
could be a 5, but I tend to go with 8. And her astrology sign is Sagittarius, which I don't know anything about astrology, but a good friend of mine who always reads my books while I'm writing them and helps me like work through stuff. She knows astrology signs really well, so I always ask her. She's like, "Hey, I'm like, what sign are these characters?" So Linnell's Sagittarius. Daniel is an Enneagram 6 or 2. I can't pick between those two, but those are usually like real life people who are a 6 or 2 often don't know which one they are. And he's a Pisces. Zach is an Enneagram 1. No idea what his astrology sign is. And Eric is a very unhealthy Enneagram 8. and an Aries. So,
Oh gosh, that's a double whammy.
so one of those.
That's so interesting. Actually, I recently found out about the Enneagram this year, and I feel like it's one of those things where once you hear it, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I'll
My
if
mom
I
is an Enneagram coach, so I know a lot about it.
well, and that would be really useful to create such different and believable characters, so you kind of know what's driving them. Is there anything that you are working on now, or do you have any exciting projects coming up?
Yes, I'm working on so much, like so many things. Um, Currently, all of my focus is on a sapphic adult fantasy book that I'm writing, and it's my first real dip into like fantasy world. So that's been really fun to work on to like build this world. And then I'm also working on a book called The Run, which is another dystopian like thriller type book, although it's not fast paced like the registration, but it's much darker than the registration. And it's actually the first book I ever really wrote. I wrote it like way back in 2016, but I'm like bringing it back and fixing it because my writing's gotten better. And then once I'm done with the fantasy, like the first draft of the fantasy book, I'm going to start tackling the sequel to the registration. So that'll be really exciting.
So there is a to be continued element to the registration, which I'm so happy about because it would work nicely as a standalone, but there's so many unanswered questions that it's going to be good to see how they get answered.
I'm excited to get into it because with the sequel, I'm gonna be able to get into a lot of the more like political aspects of the registration rather than just surviving. So that'll be fun.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, it has been such a treat chatting with you. Thank you so much for talking with me about your upcoming book. And congratulations again on the movie adaptation that'll be coming out. Where can we find you online?
My website's madisonlawson.com, so you can go there and find links to everything else. But Instagram is Madison Lawson, and Twitter is Madison Lawson 96. But everything is linked on my website, which is just madisonlawson.com.
Perfect. And I will put that down in the description below. Again, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful chatting.
Thanks for having me.